A regrettable day yesterday has forced me to take some time to really step back and evaluate everything Arizona State football following the transfer of two stud players in Ricky Pearsall and Eric Gentry. What are my thoughts on a Friday edition of the Locked on Sun Devils podcast? We'll get to that in just a moment.
You are Locked on Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked on Sun Devils podcast. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils football, basketball, baseball, and otherwise. Thank you so much for making the Locked on Sun Devils your first listen every day. Remember, this podcast is free and available on all platforms, such as YouTube. If you would like to check this podcast out in an audio, or not an audio, a visual platform. If you want to check us out on an audio platform, pretty much wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, we're there, free and available Monday through Friday. Like I said, it's the best Sun Devils content in the whole wide world. If you're on Twitter, go ahead and make sure you hit me with that follow at RichieBrads36. Follow the podcast while you're there as well at LO_Sun Devils and stay up to date on everything going on with the Sun Devils. That being said, I am going to dedicate this entire episode to talking about the latest news regarding the transfer portal for Arizona State. That, unfortunately, being the loss of two more players, but not just any two players. The Sun Devils have just lost their number one receiver and their best linebacker. Both entered the transfer portal on the exact same day. Those players, of course, being wide receiver Ricky Pearsall and linebacker Eric Genrty. Pearsall, heading into his senior season, had a massive breakout year for Arizona State, catching 48 passes for 580 yards, 4 touchdowns, had 44 yards on the ground, a rushing touchdown, and also threw a touchdown. So the dude had over 600 total scrimmage yards and 6 combined touchdowns for the Sun Devils in a passing offense that truly was lacking any kind of explosiveness. Ricky Pearsall provided that explosiveness. Now, on the flip side of the ball, Eric Genrty leaving Arizona State after his freshman season, which saw him get All-American honors as a freshman, all freshman honors, I should say. 45 tackles, 5 for a loss, 1 sack, and a couple passes deflected. He looked like he was going to be on his way to becoming a very, very good player for the Sun Devils. But unfortunately, both of them have entered the transfer portal. And while nothing has been concrete yet as to why, there is a lot of rumors circulating that this does have something to do with NIL, which is very unfortunate. And I'm going to get into my feelings on that in just a minute. But end of the day, this is a huge blow for Arizona State. You lost your number one receiver. You lost arguably your most talented defensive player entirely. And both of them were going to have massive roles for you this year, and especially for Eric Genrty. That is just an absolute killer blow to this Sun Devils team entirely, not just the defense, not just the front seven. Gentry looked like one of the best players on this team. In fact, I ranked him as my second best player coming into the year for the Sun Devils, only behind Jermaine Lole. So to lose Gentry like that is just freaking brutal. And getting into my thoughts very briefly on the situation. So it wasn't that long ago that Jayden Daniels transferred, and Daniels' transfer reasonings have only very recently come out, but he ultimately decided to transfer for his future. And I'm totally for that. Absolutely. I'm pro player till the day I die. With Gentry and Pearsall, that is no different. I am still pro player. If they transferred for NIL reasons, then absolutely go secure your bag, as stupid as this sounds to the older generation, but chase your bag. Don't worry about anyone else. Line your pockets, because this is a very unforgiving sport. and your career can be over in an instant. So to be putting your body on the line the way that you do, you should absolutely get something out of it. And that appears to be the situation that these guys are getting into. And I'm for it, it sucks so much. I feel more deflated about this than I did with Jayden Daniels, and I was pretty upset about Jayden. And it took a lot for me to get right back to being positive with Arizona State, but now I'm right back into being a negative Nancy. I mean, this is just a brutal blow to this team. You're losing your number one receiver in a receiving room that doesn't have one true standout guy. You have a bunch of interesting upside. Andre Johnson showed off some awesome potential as a deep threat last year, but could not consistently capitalize on his opportunities. Meanwhile, you have LV Bunkley Shelton, who I'm a big fan of, and I like Bunkley Shelton to step into a bigger role for the Sun Devils, and now, unfortunately, he kind of has to. Elijah Badger was somebody who showed a lot of potential throughout the spring practices. That this year looks like a potential deep threat for the team. We're still hoping and begging that Chad Johnson Jr. is going to find his way onto the football field sooner rather than later. And of course, Brian Thompson coming back as the super redshirt graduate senior with the COVID year. I mean, there's guys that they're it's so difficult to be excited about this passing offense when you lose your number one receiver. You have so many unknowns, and who knows, you could have 2,000-yard receivers with these guys. You truly could. Like, there's potential and upside for these guys, but that's what it is. It's potential and upside. You don't know what you're getting right now, and it's just with the passing offense. You lost Jayden Daniels, so you have an unknown at quarterback. And you have two quarterbacks who are completely different from each other. Because if you're rolling with Paul Tyson, you've got your standard, typical prototype pocket passer. But if you roll with Trent Bourguet, then you've got a little more mobility and fits the offense a little better for what we've seen over the last 10 years. But they needed consistency to throw to. And you now have no consistency. The most consistent option was Ricky Pearsall, and he's gone. Andre Johnson, it felt like, only played half the year because he just fell off the map. LV Bunkley Shelton, to me, is the best receiver we have right now. He's the only guy who really has any more actual notable experience for the team. And outside of that, if you weren't going to rely on your run game before, you're going to have to now. You do not have a choice, because there is a very real chance that you have one of the worst passing attacks in all of college football, let alone the Pac-12. Is this an overreaction? Sure, it could be. But it's also a very fair response, because there is not a lot of certainty right now. And to make matters even more complicated, you have a new offensive coordinator coming in. This is not a good look for the Sun Devils. Let's go ahead and hop into our first break. When we return, we're just going to pick up the conversation right back from where we left off. That's the whole focus of this show. That show, of course, being the Locked On Sun Devils. Guys, I know it's that time of year. You're ready to give up on your New Year's resolutions, but let me tell you that it's not too late. Don't give up quite yet. If you're really struggling, go get a Built Bar right now. If you haven't tried their Puffs, you're absolutely missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors like yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. They're all so good, they're going to be your new favorite. And just like all Built Bars, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Meanwhile, they manage to be low calorie and high protein. If you look at the macros chart, you'll be absolutely blown away. Most Built Bars contain just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which is typically around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. With tons of flavors like mint brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month, the white chocolate cookies and cream. They have tons of delicious flavors with more flavors coming out all the time. They think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It'll be delicious and good for you. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it delicious first and figure out how to make it healthy next. And I don't know how, but they pull it off every single time. So here's the offer. Go to Built.com right now and use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. And again, thank you guys so much for making Locked On Sun Devils your first listen every single day. Remember, this podcast is free and available on all platforms. Meanwhile, you need to make sure that you are sticking here for the Locked On NFL Draft live coverage. For the first time ever, Locked On is hosting live coverage of the 2022 NFL Draft from our studios in Dallas with pick-by-pick analysis from our local team experts and draft gurus. Tune in all 3 days as our draft team guides you through every pick and every trade in real time. It all starts Thursday, April 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern, available on the Locked On NFL and Locked On NFL on YouTube and on the Odyssey app. Make sure you don't miss it, guys, because there's a lot of Sun Devils that are going to be in this draft. You absolutely want to stay in tune with that. Meanwhile, getting back to the very depressing topic, I want to continue a little bit with the offense before we hop over to the defensive side of the ball. When I had last left off, I said that you truly have to rely on the run game even more than you already were. You seriously, you have got to run the ball close to 400 times. And you've got to get all of your running backs involved. All of them. Daniel Ngata and Xavier Valade need to be near the top of the Pac-12 in touches. I wouldn't be mad if both of them had 200 carries this year. And get them involved in the passing game too. I think they both can be really good pass catching options for the Sun Devils. And quite frankly, they're going to have to be. They truly are. The good news is they can be, at least on the surface. So, who knows? But you're going to have to be one of the most run-heavy teams in all of college football, probably the most run-heavy team in the Pac-12, and you're gonna be hoping and praying that run game is good enough to put points up on the board and chew clock. Because if that defense doesn't step up, you're gonna find yourself in shootouts. And I got bad news for you. This team, especially the way it looks right now, is not built to win shootouts. ASU has never really been that shootout kind of team. Now they really aren't. And again, I just want to emphasize, if for no one else, myself, this could still be a good passing team. Like, the potential of Andre Johnson and LV Bunkley Shelton and Elijah Badger should get us a little bit of hope. But it's hard to really just throw yourself all in on this situation right now. There's a lot of reason to be negative. And I don't like being negative, but it's so hard not to be. I don't know what to expect from the passing game. What I am expecting is it to be historically bad for Arizona State. Meanwhile, with the run game, it's going to be hyper productive in the touches department. Whether or not it turns into anything, you certainly hope so. But I truly think this is going to have to be a season where you almost take like an Army-Navy approach and you just run the you-know-what out of the football and pass it as sparingly as possible. If for no other reason than just the unknown factor. This is I really want to emphasize this here. This isn't me trying to talk down on what we have. I'm not saying that the receivers are bad. I'm not saying the quarterbacks are bad. I'm saying there's a lot of unknown, and going in blindly and saying we're going to be just fine, we're going to throw for 4,000 yards, we're going to have 2,000-yard receivers, that's ignorance. Because last year with Jayden Daniels in his third season and a slew of receivers, Ricky Pearsall, of course, being one of those guys, this was still an underwhelming passing attack. So to go into this year with the assumption that we're going to be just fine, that's arrogance. I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer. I'm trying to be realistic. And the realistic aspect that we have to accept here is this is not a good look for the Sun Devils right now. But I've been wrong before. Flipping over to the defensive side of the ball now. Here's good news. If you were going to lose a guy at a position, it had to be linebacker. So you had like an embarrassment of riches at the linebacker position. You had 5 guys. You had the Soley brothers, Merlin Robertson, Rodney Gross, the transfer, and of course Eric Gentry. Now Gentry's out, but you still have the Soley brothers, who the younger of the two, Connor, looked very, very talented. You have Merlin Robertson, who is the veteran on the defense, and he's going to be calling the shots, and he's going to be calling the defense. He's going to be quarterbacking it. And then you have Rodney Gross coming in, who transferred from Mississippi State, who didn't get very much starting time at all. Not even starting time, just time on the field in general. But you hope that he can maybe find something to build off of here at Arizona State, like a fresh start, and he's got 3 years to figure it out. But right now, you're looking at Kyle Soley, the older of the two, Merlin Robertson, and probably a rotation of Connor Soley and Rodney Gross, which isn't the worst thing in the world. It's just, oh my God, there was so much excitement when we thought about Eric Gentry. This was a dude, I can't remember if I brought it up or if a good friend of the podcast, Anya Drew, brought it up on the pod or off the pod. But there was a conversation of this guy reminds you of Micah Parsons. And I mean, obviously that's huge comparison. More or less in the build of the way they're made and in the way of their prowess of athletic ability and their instincts at the linebacker position. And you could put them everywhere. Like there was serious conversation about making Gentry a full-time edge rusher because of how much talent Arizona State had at the linebacker spot. So you lose a guy with that much athletic upside. That's brutal. Now you talk about the fact that he was your youngest and most talented player coming into the year. Again, I had Gentry as my number 2 behind Jermaine Lole. The only reason I had him behind Lole, though, is because Lole was an outstanding player coming into 2021 before the injury. He had that established credibility for me, which is why I placed him number 1 on my list. But I wouldn't have been even remotely surprised if Gentry had usurped him of that spot by the end of the year. So losing Gentry is just an absolute dagger to this defense. I'm going to leave it right there. We're going to hop into the final break of this edition of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast. When we return for the final segment, I'm just going to give my closing thoughts on all of this. Try not to be as negative as possible. This, of course, is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast. BetOnline.net is still your number 1 source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. And let's not waste any more time, guys. Let's continue to rip this Band-Aid off until it doesn't hurt anymore. But it's going to continue to hurt for a long, long time. Finishing my thoughts on the defensive side of the ball before putting a bow on it all together. Like I said, if there was a position for you to lose a guy at for the defense, it had to be linebacker, and thankfully it was linebacker. It's just unfortunate that you took away the best one. The highest upside guy, the most physically talented and gifted, and one of the guys who we were hoping was going to be a figure in this defense for at least the next 2 years and hopefully 3. But he's gone. And it's brutal. You're going to have to rely on your veterans more than ever now. You need Robertson to continue his steady play. And hopefully, get back to what he was as a freshman. You're hoping that Kyle Sully can continue being steady as well. Admittedly, the floor is not that high and the ceiling is even lower. With Connor Sully, who showed a lot of promise, you're hoping that he can really explode this year. You're going to be betting on the younger of the Sully brothers to become that force that you were betting on Eric Gentry to be. With Rodney Gross, this has got to be a developmental year for him. We cannot give him sky-high expectations. It's not fair to him at all, especially now that he's going to be forced into more and more playing time, which he could easily step up for. And I'm rooting for that, obviously. But we cannot go into the year expecting Rodney Gross to become a massive component for the defense. Meanwhile, the guys in front of him, still got them. We still got them. We still got Lole. We got Moore. We got Green. Omar Norman Lott, Nevesta Jade Silva, the transfer coming in. There's tons of depth on the defensive line. So that is still a good constant for you too, is you haven't lost those guys. That's good. That's good for you. Back end is still a problem. You're really hoping that Corey Bethley finds a way to be like Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. And that's the other thing, is you're probably going to need Bethley to find some more time playing near the box, is because it's just going to be so hard to replace that. Overall thoughts now, this sucks. And it double sucks because it's 2 great players. It's 2 of the most important players the Sun Devils were going to have coming into this season. Take into account everything else the Sun Devils have lost. I went and retweeted this on the Locked On Sun Devils Twitter account from Brad Denny. The total amount of transfers we've had is unbelievable. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 transfers right now. Those guys being quarterback Jayden Daniels, defensive back Tommy Hill, running back Chip Trayanum, wide receiver Johnny Wilson, wide receiver Gordon Porter, wide receiver Lanyata Alexander, linebacker Jordan Banks, quarterback Ethan Long, defensive back Cam Phillips, kicker Christian Zendejas, linebacker Eric Gentry, and wide receiver Ricky Pearsall. That's a lot of really important names. That is so many important names. And I have a hard time believing that it's for better opportunity and it's for NIL deals. This this university is going to get slammed. They're going to get slammed by the NCAA. And something that I'm going to talk about a little more next week is it is probably time to really start looking inward at Arizona State in the athletic program. Michael Crow needs to have a very deep heart-to-heart conversation with Ray Anderson. And they need to really figure out what the future of this athletic program is. Herm Edwards' seat is absolutely scorching hot right now. And the entirety of the Arizona State Sun Devils football program is not in shambles, but it is not looking good. there is a lot of uncertainty. That's the word of the podcast, uncertainty. Today's word of the day is uncertainty. I don't know. I'm trying to be as positive as I can, but it's hard not to be. I'm a Debbie Downer today. It's just, as a famous Richie Bradshaw would say, it is what it is. And unfortunately, that's where I'm just going to have to leave it. Because if I continue to talk, I'm just going to continue to get more and more depressed. And I'm running out of ways to describe how awful this situation is. But we'll find a way through it, guys. All we got to do is beat U of A, and it's a successful year. And I still like our odds of doing that. But thank you guys so much for making the Locked on Sun Devils your first listen every day. Remember that this podcast is always free and available on all platforms, including but not being limited to Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, the Odyssey app, Spotify. You can also check us out on YouTube if you'd like to see this podcast in a visual platform. But wherever you get your podcasts, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, 5-star, rate, share, all that good stuff. Make sure you never miss a podcast. We are here Monday through Friday. If you're on Twitter, follow me at RichieBrads36 and follow the podcast while you're there as well at LO_Sun Devils. Now, do me a favor, go ahead and make your next listen to Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft alive every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. Just like the Locked On Sun Devils, it is free and available on all platforms. And until next time, guys, stay positive and keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.